Hello and welcome to episode 102 of Communicast, the podcast dedicated to enhancing communication skills. I'm your host, Scott D'Amico, president of Communispond. Today I'm joined by Bill Benjamin, partner at the Institute for Health and Human Potential. With a background in mathematics and computer science, Bill's journey into the world of leadership and communication began when he realized that technical excellence doesn't automatically translate into people leadership. In this episode, we explore the concept of the last 8%, the critical, often avoided moments in tough conversations that define relationships, trust, and leadership effectiveness. This episode is filled with practical insights for anyone who wants to lead with courage, communicate with clarity, and build a culture of honest dialogue. Let's dive in. Bill, thank you so much for joining me.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Really looking forward to the conversation today. Before we get started, if you can, just tell the listeners a little bit about you, your career journey, and the exciting work that you're doing today.
Thanks. I think the thing people find interesting about me is that I have degrees in mathematics and computer science, and now I speak on the topics of culture and leadership. And so my journey was, I was a high performer at a computer software company, and of course what the companies do with their high performers, well, they promote them, make them a manager. The problem is it turned out I wasn't a very good manager. I wasn't a very good leader. I wasn't building a great culture on my team. People didn't really like working for me. And I was really struggling at that time. And it was at that time that I actually got exposed as a client to this work that we and I do now. And it really made a difference for me. And I spent 4 or 5 years, really learning it, doing the training, the assessments, everything. And it made such a big difference for me that I decided to leave the computer software industry and do this for a living. So that's a quick version of my story.
Wow, definitely must have had an impact on you to get you to leave your career, to move into doing that, focusing in on your business and your career. And yeah, very interesting when you think of computer science, mathematics background. Typically don't hear a whole lot of that, leadership, speaking experience, consulting experience. And, we definitely see this a lot with the work that we do with folks that are in technical backgrounds that move into leadership positions. Oftentimes there is some sort of a gap there around just leadership and communication. So it's fascinating to hear that firsthand from somebody that went through it, got the training, got the experience, and had such a big impact, kind of really ran with it.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing that I loved about our work is that it's very research and brain science based because I'm very logical and analytical. And again, we originally started in the field of emotional intelligence. And I thought, oh, that's just a bunch of soft and squishy stuff. But I've learned, that there's real brain science to it. And so I love the research that we do. So that's kind of what appealed to me about the work.
Yeah, so if we can, and I'll put links in the show notes for folks listening to this to your organization. Maybe just tell them a little bit about the company and the type of work that you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, the Institute for Health and Human Potential, we're a research and learning organization. And again, we started in the field of emotional intelligence. That's still a core part of our work. But 7 or 8 years ago, we came with this concept of the last 8%, which is really about the difficult things that we have to do. And with respect to communication, it's about those hard conversations. And so we really started doing some research and some work around that. And so that's really the focus of our work. And in fact, that concept of the last 8% in a culture map we've created is the subject of a Harvard Business Review article that actually happens to be coming out on September 3rd, which for those who are listening to this after that, we're recording before that.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'll definitely be on the lookout for that. And as I think about, you talk about the last 8%, the tough conversations, being able to effectively have those tough conversations really is a hallmark of a great communicator. And from your work and your experience, I'm sure you've interacted with some really strong communicators. So when you hear that, right, when you hear somebody described as being a great communicator or that they have strong communication skills, what's the image that comes to mind for you?
Well, I think that's the thing about communication. It's such a broad term. So I certainly think of the person who's passionate and effusive and articulate, which is important. And I don't want to downplay that at all. That's not so much our area of work. Our area of work is around being able to communicate the difficult things, this idea of the last 8%. And the reason we know that's so important to a leader's reputation, to relationships, is because of the cortisol effect. And the cortisol effect is that when there's tension, pressure, conflict, uncertainty, cortisol gets released, which causes memories to sear in. So people remember how you showed up in that difficult conversation, in that what we call last 8% conversation. They don't remember what you were doing in the 92% of conversations when everything was going well and the deadlines were being met. They remember those tough conversations. So that is absolutely critical to someone's success, both in business and in your personal life. So that's why we put a little more emphasis on being able to skillfully communicate those last 8%, the last 8% of a conversation. Because what we found in our research is that, and we did a survey of 34,000 people, is that people feel on average, it's 7.56%, which we rounded up to 8%, that people feel they leave unsaid in a difficult
Mhm.
conversation. So you get 80, 90, 92% of the way there, the other person starts reacting. Many people avoid, they don't step in, they step back. They don't really say that last 8%, the part that really needs to be said. And so that concept actually kicked off our last 7 years of work, which is culminating in this HBR article and a book as well.
Well, as you mentioned with the cortisol effect, if I challenge anyone listening to this, if you think back to the memories that you have, whether it's early in your career, throughout school, childhood, guaranteed those memories are all tied to emotion, right?
Yes.
Whether it's joy, excitement, fear, whatever. But in this case, right, where you've been having those types of tough conversations, whether somebody in your family, friend, or work is having with you. So absolutely, it really grounds that. And that's how you can have an impact. And yeah, I'd love to hear your perspective on this because I think a lot of times people conflate a hard conversation with maybe negative or being mean, right? And that's why they don't do
Yes.
it. And it's a huge, it's maybe not a huge, a subtle distinction. And I just wanted from your perspective, kind of the difference and the nuances between those two.
Yeah, and that's a really important point. And we do, we do culture work with organizations, and that's one of the things we're really clear about. Saying you want to be a last percent organization doesn't give people license to be mean, say whatever they want, be a bully. What we found in our research, and I'm also going to tie this back into your question a few minutes ago of what makes a great communicator, is 68% of people, when faced with a difficult conversation, that last 8%, when it's not going well, they avoid. They kind of shut down. Now, what about the other 32%? Well, I fall into that category sometimes. I'm in that difficult conversation. A person's reacting. Instead of stepping back, I'm stepping in, but I'm coming on too strong and I'm making a mess of it. So I can be a bit, so we talk about people either being avoiders or make a messers. And of course, it's situational, right? There might be certain situations, like if a senior person is challenging you, you might be more likely to avoid. But when my teenage daughter is yelling, I'm way more likely to yell back, which, by the way, all I'm doing is teaching her to yell when she's frustrated. I'm literally building the neural pathways in her brain as her model. So I'm working on that. So to us, a great communicator is someone who can push through the discomfort of approaching a last 8% conversation. And in some ways, you're trading that short-term discomfort or anxiety for long-term regret.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know what happens when you don't speak your truth, when you didn't really say what needed to be said, right? We hold that in and that becomes shame and regret. So you can push through that discomfort, but do it skillfully so you're not making a mess. So it's the middle ground. So great communicators, around this idea of tough conversations can push through the discomfort, yet do it skillfully.
And I think you typically hear people, when it comes to regrets, it's the things that they didn't do or they didn't say that they regret more so than what they have done and what they have said. But to your point, being able to do it, tactfully and effectively.
Yeah.
One of the things that you hit on there that I think is really important that I don't want folks to miss is having that culture within your organization where people feel comfortable having those 8%, the last 8%
That's right.
conversations, especially when it's down moving up in the organization. I think
Yes.
a lot of times when people think about challenging conversations, they're thinking maybe the leader having it with somebody on their team. But there's a lot of times, I'm sure a lot of that 60, was it 62 or 68%
68%.
fall into the category where they need to have that conversation with their boss, maybe around, hey, I'm not getting from you what I need, or you hear things that are going on. So I think having that culture at the organization is
Well,
fundamental.
in fact, there's a research study that 70% of people in organizations don't speak up when they see something wrong or have an idea that they think could help. in our assessment. So one of the things we can do, so we have a culture assessment where we can assess, where an organization is on our culture map. One of the questions that really every organization scores really low on is we name inconvenient truths, difficult to discuss issues on this team. I mean, that's hard. And you know what happens when inconvenient truths aren't named? Then the issue isn't solved. Plus, then you get the meeting after the meeting and talk about what wasn't said in the meeting. Right? It's incredibly unproductive. And so that really is that skill. And you made a really good point is the idea of you have to have a culture that supports it. So there's actually, again, the other thing that really kind of kicked off our research, because up until 7 or 8 years ago, we were really doing primarily individual development, individual leader, emotional intelligence capabilities. But that's only 50% of what it takes to have an organization where people perform the way you need them to. The other 50% is the environment, the culture they're in. So if you want a culture where people speak up, but senior leaders are shooting their ideas down, you're not going to be able to get nearly as effective the behaviors you need. And so it really is that balance of each individual person demonstrating, advocating, stepping in the last 8%, but also creating a culture that enables that.
Absolutely agree. And as I think of the skills that are needed in the workforce today for employees that are wanting to have those last 8% conversations, I'm sure there's definitely things that you all work with folks and teach them and really how to effectively do that. And it brings me back to a conversation I had with a past guest where we were talking about, I think, ideation and people that just bring up ideas, right? Not necessarily that 8%, but they're bringing ideas. And he shared
Mhm.
the term of don't be an idea grenadier. Basically, you pull the pin and just throw ideas over the fence constantly and just expect everyone else to deal with them, to come with a plan, so to speak, when you have
Mhm.
ideas. So as you're seeing this in the workplace, what are skills associated or things that people are doing that either help them get comfortable having those conversations, or if they're comfortable, to do them effectively?
Yeah, and it's really both. So it starts with that piece, that self-management, particularly if you're an avoider, but even if you make a messer, that's based on emotions. So, it's key to learn some emotional intelligence, self-regulation skills so that when you are going to step into that conversation, you're not triggered. Because not only will you not be as effective, but you'll trigger the other person, and then they're on the defensive. So you have to manage your own emotions, number one, to push through the discomfort, but number two, so you don't show up triggered and you don't trigger the other person. So that self-management, that's a key part of what we teach. Then the second part, as you mentioned, is the actual skills of how do you approach a difficult conversation in a way where the other person can hear you. And I'll just give one example of something that we
Mhm.
teach. And again, it's going to sound simple, but we often forget to do it. A lot of times, we're thinking about this tough conversation. We're up in the middle of the night worrying about it. We've written notes, and we get in and we just launch right in, and we start making statements. Um, what you want to do, we talk about starting on the other side of the bridge. Start by asking questions. Start by getting their perspective, their point of view, because that actually calms themselves. They start to feel heard. You might learn something you didn't know, because so often, right, we're making assumptions. And so, what we encourage is don't launch right into, well, we need to talk about what you did, in that meeting. It's like, hey, how did you feel about the meeting? Tell me what was going on for you. What was that like? Now, what you don't want to do is in a half-hour meeting, spend 25 minutes doing that and avoiding leaving yourself 5 minutes for the last 8%. So maybe in a half-hour meeting, you're spending the first 10 minutes getting their feedback. And then you do have to let them know that last 8%, but start on their side of the bridge. Start by asking questions. That's a key approach in our difficult conversation program. It's really hard because if you are a little triggered, you tend to get less curious. You tend to
Mhm.
think you're right. You tend to start to make statements. And so that's why the self-management is so important, because if you're going to try to do that, you have to walk in curious, not certain.
I love that. And there's so many parallels to really how we think about more broadly just effective communication with some of those things that you hit on with
Yeah.
preparation, right? Maybe you're the day before, the night before, you're thinking about it, you're jotting some notes down, you're preparing, you're kind of playing through maybe how it may go, you're rehearsing it, so to speak. I think then the second thought really is that mindset
Yeah.
that if there is a difficult conversation, if I just came out of another difficult meeting or I came out of a scenario where I'm stressed, I'm on edge, probably not the right time to go in and have one of those 8% conversations.
Well, no,
And
because you
then,
probably have, because when you get triggered like that, you have cortisol and adrenaline in your
yep.
system. And so you're on high alert. It's like if you're in the jungle. And if you're in the jungle and you just got scratched by a tiger and you hear wind rustling in the bushes, what do you assume the wind is? Well, you assume it's a tiger, then your brain reacts like it's a tiger. So yeah, if you had a difficult meeting and then you go to another one, you're way more likely to react to things that are wind and not tigers. That's the other thing we talk about because the other thing is that again, we did a survey and people indicated that 42% of their last 8% conversations are of the expected type. In other words, I know I'm walking into a situation where I've got to give somebody some feedback. I've got to say no. They're going to be unhappy. The other 58% are the unexpected last 8% moments. You're going about your day and everything's fine, and then suddenly someone drops something on you. Let's move the deadline up a week. You've got to add this, and suddenly you're reacting. And so that ability to manage in both situations and still stay curious is incredibly impactful. In fact, I liked your idea of not being an idea. What was it? An idea?
Idea grenadier.
An idea grenadier. You also don't want to be an idea crusher.
Hmm.
Where every time say, oh, well, we've tried that, and we're not going to have the resources to do that, and we're like to be stay open to people's ideas
Hmm.
before you go right to crushing it. That's actually something I tend to do because my business partner JP, who founded the company, he's our creative, he's our thought leader. He comes up with so many ideas, and I really had to learn not to just shut him down right away because even
Hmm.
though that whole idea might not be the right one, maybe some pieces of it, or maybe some element, or maybe there's something. And so we've been working together for 24 years now, and so we've actually gotten really good at because I have more the implementation. Let's drive this. He's got more the big idea, and so we actually really combine really well. But I've had but he's also had to learn not to keep throwing ideas out when we're in the middle of executing. So
Exactly.
it's really both challenges.
Yeah,
Um,
it's about that awareness, both self-awareness and awareness of situational awareness,
yeah,
that emotional intelligence as to what's going on. Are we in a resource constrained environment? Is now the
yeah.
time to bring up all these other ideas? And as you mentioned, not to constantly just immediately shut things down. And kind of going back to this idea of making sure in the right mindset, that one of the big things that we train on when it comes to communication really is around pausing.
Mm,
And sometimes that pause can be for 2 seconds and
yeah.
have a big impact. Sometimes it might need to be a day, right? Or an hour where you get something dumped on you, get an email from your boss. Hey, we need to push the deadline up by a week. Knee jerk reaction might be, what the what, or yes, okay, just immediately agreeing to it when you know that's not best. So give it some time to marinate, think through it, formulate a response so you can. I think a prior guest said this as well. You want to respond versus react. There's a big difference when you're responding to something versus reacting to something.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. In fact, our key emotional management strategy, and we actually developed this with the US Navy over 27 years ago, is called the SOS. And we intentionally use the SOS metaphor because A, it was developed for the Navy, but B, it's kind of like, you're sinking and you want to get above water. The first S is stop. So what you just talked about, that pause, that step back. And one of the things that happens when we're emotionally triggered is the brain is fighting tigers. So it feels like you have to take action. I have to shut down or I have to say yes or no. But so often, you're right, we can just step back and say, okay, well, us think about that. I need to go back and talk to my team before we feel like we have to react right away. So we stop. The O is oxygenate. Everybody knows a deep conscious breath can be so powerful. But now I've learned that deep conscious breath actually minimizes the impact of the chemicals that your emotional system has released. So it actually dissipates the adrenaline and the cortisol so that you can show up more effectively. And then finally, the final S is seek information. Because so often we make most of our jump to judgment decisions on less than 5% of available information.
Mhm.
So often we're missing information. We can also ask ourselves, what's the best course of action for me? Should I really type reply to all and add three people and send this email in a triggered state? Or maybe I should put it in the draft folder, go for a walk, come back. And I've done this many times, by the way.
Yep.
Never once have I looked at that email I wrote in a triggered state and thought, yeah, that's the email I should send. That's me at my best. That's me being a great communicator. So absolutely, that pause and then for us add in the oxygenate and seek information is incredibly powerful. Both for your expected last 8% moments, so you can keep yourself calm heading in and keep yourself curious, but also in those unexpected moments where all of a sudden you're hit with something, you stop, you take that deep breath, that pause before you step back in. Really powerful.
Love it. Yeah. Very similar to when you are doing a speaking engagement, presenting in front of a large group. You're up on stage and you look out and you see all of those eyes on you. Your body starts to react. It goes back to some of those primal states where it's in fear, you're outnumbered. Whereas we teach where you connect with somebody, deliver one thought to them, to their set of eyes, you pause, you breathe, you find somebody else. And what that does, in essence, it tricks your brain into I don't have all these people out here. I'm having a whole bunch of one-on-one conversations with people, which brings those stress levels down. As you're able to breathe, the nerves come down. And the added benefit, when you're pausing and not talking, guess what? Your brain can catch up to your
Yeah.
mouth and you eliminate all of those pesky filler words.
I love that. I mean, for a lot of people, public speaking is a last 8% moment. And it isn't just standing up in front of an audience. For some people, it's actually speaking up in a meeting, pushing back, challenging the status quo, naming that inconvenient truth. And so, your listeners, you want to be thinking about, how am I doing at stepping into those tough conversations? Am I willing to speak up? Am I willing to, speak my truth? And if you're a leader, what kind of environment are you creating? Are you creating that safety where it's okay for people to speak up? Because you're absolutely right that public speaking is such a fear, but it can actually be on a micro level where someone just, even in a one-on-one conversation,
Mm-hmm.
someone's afraid of challenging the boss or pushing back, or coming up with an idea that's, might sound critical to someone else's suggestion. But you need that. What we know is that high performing teams, high performing organizations requires risk taking to have to communicate, to have those tough conversations, also risk taking around decisions. But the human brain is wired to default to protection, not risk. So our whole work, this whole concept of the last 8% is really all about risk taking. And the last 8% is really the gap between the risk you should take and the risk you are taking. And to try to step into that gap and do it skillfully without making a mess.
Yes.
That's the balance. Again, to me, that's the great, that's the great communication that we're trying to help people get better at, is not avoiding but not making a mess.
Yes, that's a very big distinction. Doing it without making a mess. Yeah, I like that. I'll have to share that tactic with my kids as well.
The best
So
thing you can do, and I know you know that, is model for your kids.
yes,
Because we like to say, don't worry the kids aren't listening to you. Worry that they're watching everything you do. So you are your kids' models. For anyone who's here listening and has is a parent knows that.
spot on. So with my kids, that I model, we focus on teaching communication skills. So I try to model those communication skills, connecting with them. When I talk to them, I put my phone down, I direct my body in
Mm,
their direction so they know that I'm listening and I'm not just scrolling and looking through email. Uh-huh.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Whenever you get those chance, model those skills. I love that, right? Don't worry that they're listening, worry that they are watching you because they are picking up on absolutely what you do.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Bill, shifting gears a little bit, if you think about your career and the success that you've had, you know, if you'd have to point to say one key communication skill that has really set you apart and helped you get to where you are today, what would you say that is?
It's curiosity versus certainty, and I still fall into that trap. And I'm much better at it at work now, but honestly, in my personal life, if I feel criticized or I feel attacked, um, I shut down. I become defensive. I'm not really listening and to understand, why she might be communicating what she's communicating, and that's causing her to feel dismissed, which is causing her to get even more triggered. And so I'm really working at that SOS, that staying
Mhm.
calm and showing up with curiosity. So it's that ability to be curious, but especially in a last 8% moment when I'm not feeling curious.
I like that distinction there of curiosity when you're receiving some sort of feedback, right? Constructive feedback, whatever you want to call it. Oftentimes, when people think of curiosity, it's maybe around they're a creative person, they're coming up with ideas for the business. But when it comes to relationships, personal or professional, that curiosity really does come in handy when you are faced with that 8% conversation where somebody is bringing something to your attention, maybe about whether it's the quality of your work or the drive or the way that you interact with people rather than immediately going on the defensive and coming right back at
Yeah.
them, pausing, and really leaning into it and asking, oh gosh, why are people feeling this way? Or what am I doing that's putting that image out there, that perception out there to people? So spot
Yeah,
on.
and by the way, I'm just realizing this now. As I've thought of a great communicator, it's always really been around, well, when they have something to say, how they say it, are they skillful, are they passionate? But it's also receiving feedback. It's also having someone give you feedback, and can you be open? That's communication, right? So a great communicator is bi-directional, right? It's like, okay, you can skillfully share feedback, but you can also model accepting feedback. Because by the way, if you're getting defensive, then you're modeling getting defensive, then you can't expect them people to receive your feedback without getting defensive, right? You've got to model that for your team and your kids.
Absolutely. And a lot of people don't realize this with the name of our company, Communispond, is from communicate and respond. It's
Oh,
that
I
two-way
didn't.
street.
You're right. I did not make that
Yeah, a
connection.
lot of people don't pick up on that because it's there's a big difference between communication and simply information dissemination. Just
Yes.
putting something out there with no regard to how it's received, with no regard to the frequencies that are coming back, to me
Yeah.
really is not communication.
Yeah. I really like that because it really is bi-directional. I think when people think about communication, they really only focus on the one way as opposed to the receiving and how they're handling that, which as a leader might even be more important because there's what we call CEO's disease, which is the higher up in an organization you go, the less candid feedback you get because
Hmm.
people are afraid to share things. And then stuff's not getting named, and all of a sudden there's a huge issue, and it wasn't addressed early on because people were afraid to share it. So that ability to be open and receive feedback is incredibly valuable. That responding that's in your company name, that's awesome.
Bill, who has been someone from throughout your career, personal, professional, maybe it's somebody that you don't necessarily know, but you've picked up on things that's had an impact on your communication style. Maybe you've taken something from them, made it your own, and really put it into that communication tool belt.
Three people come to mind. One is the first leader I ever had. He was had such a great way of connecting and making you feel important. He made me feel like he expected more of me than I knew what I was capable of. Yet he didn't have a lot of time. So I think one of the things people think is, gosh, communication, I have to spend a lot of time. These might be 5, 6 minute conversations. This might be in a car on the way to visiting a client. Like what he did in that time though. So that ability to make someone feel valued, important. Because here's the thing, if you are going to have a difficult conversation with someone, if they see you in that light, if they think, oh, Bill values me, he has my best interest in mind, they're going to be way more open to the feedback. Whereas if it's like, no, I don't know, I don't really trust Bill and I don't like the way he interacts with me and I'm not open to his feedback. So that ability to be someone where people are willing to receive your feedback has a lot to do with that. So that was one person. Another is just my business partner, JP. I mean, a lot of what I'm sharing here with the last 8%, the SOS, the other side of the bridge, he taught me. And I learned as a client, initially as a client. So I went through all this training as a client when I was working at the computer software company. So I learned a lot of this as a client. And then finally, my brother-in-law, he's just an awesome guy. His ability to remain calm when I think, okay, I need to remain calm, I think of Andrew. I think, okay, how would he show? He would just, he has this amazing ability. Very passionate. He's
Mhm.
not demure. He's not, but he's just in tough situations. He has a remaining calm. So those are three people that have inspired me and helped me learn how to communicate more effectively.
I think that's the first brother-in-law shout out that we've had in over 100 episodes. Love it. All right.
Okay.
Very
By the
cool.
way,
And
by the way, I'm gonna have to call him and let him know that I just did that. Yeah, yeah.
nice. Yeah, no, that's good. And for me, like that, the calm under pressure is I think an underrated, often overlooked
Hmm.
communication skill in general, but leadership skill
Yes.
because people are looking to you, right? In times of chaos and times of uncertainty, people are going to be looking to their leaders, whether it's through what they say, what they don't say, how they say it, their body language, their tone, all of these things. So, the ability to maintain that levelness
Yeah.
about you while still being authentic and not trying to maybe just sugarcoat things, right? Not just trying to say, "Oh, everything's going to be great" when it's not,
Yeah.
but being able to lead with that calm demeanor throughout the chaos is powerful.
Yeah. I mean, that's staying calm. I mean, I often talk about, when I was first learning this, um, if there was a problem, an emergency with a client or something, I'd get panicky. I'd get anxious. I'd send terse emails. Well, all I was doing was triggering everyone else, so they're panic and anxious, and they can't be as effective. So what you need sense of urgency in business. You just don't want the sense of urgency with the panic and anxiety. You want it with confidence, solution focus, belief. So it's all about it's not again it's not about not addressing stuff and avoiding and sugarcoating it as you say. It's just doing it in a calm and skillful way. Aristotle said this. Aristotle said being angry is easy, but to be angry at the right person to the right degree for the right reason, that is not easy. So this isn't about pushing emotions down, it's
Mhm.
about channeling them skillfully.
You made me think of this concept of, from I'm going back to, gosh, high school physics, the law of conservation of energy, and every action having an equal and opposite reaction. So when you're angry and you simply respond tersely or short with people or send nasty emails, you might feel better, but that anger, that frustration, that feeling of unease didn't go away. It was simply transferred to someone
Oh, it's going to
else.
come back.
Yes,
And it's going to come back with a lot of hair on it. Absolutely. And then you're going to be dealing with that. Absolutely. I talk about that. Yeah, it comes back. It festers and it comes back. By the way, the other thing you just mentioned, I mean, just from a personal standpoint, when I was first learning this, I was getting triggered emotionally a fair bit. And that cortisol that gets released, that's your stress hormone. So, I mean, there's lots of things that go into managing stress, exercise, sleep, diet, but actually not getting triggered and releasing cortisol can have a big impact. And I was really struggling with stress. And so learning to manage my emotions and not get so triggered and not let get that cortisol get released, that's really effective. By the way, cortisol causes you to retain belly fat. So there's a good reason for your listeners not to learn to manage their emotions so they don't have too much cortisol in their system.
perfect. Bill, as we are wrapping up here, what piece of closing advice would you have to folks listening to this? It's really about the importance of developing these skills that we talked about today and the impact they can have on their career and their personal lives.
I think the number one thing, and Bob, by the way, the people who are listening because they are aggressive learners. Being aggressive learners, high performers extract 3 to 5 times the amount out of a learning opportunity as average learners. So, if you've listened to this episode or any of your other episodes and thought, well, there's something there for me, like go deeper, right? Like go reach out. I'm going to tell you some access to resources you can get. Just be an aggressive learner. That's I think the number one thing, and always be open to feedback and always be open to trying to get better.
In today's age, there is really no excuse for not growing and developing. We have so much information and knowledge at our fingertips, literally, for most of us in our hands with our phones, whether it's at home at a computer, on the TV, going to a library, finding a mentor. So many tools out there, no excuse to grow. So, Bill, if folks want to learn more about the work that you're doing, some of the resources that you have, what's the best way for them to do that? And I'll make sure I put it in the show notes.
Yeah, 3 ways I would say. One is our website, ihhp.com, Institute for Health and Human Potential. Number two, go read the Harvard Business Review article. It's called Building a Courageous Organization. You don't have to have a subscription. You can get up to 5 free articles. You just have to give them your email. So anyone can go access this article. Number three is I'm very active on LinkedIn. I share favorite research, recent strategies. I love to respond to people who come to me with their challenges. And so, Bill Benjamin, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Love it. Thank you, Bill. Thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Awesome. You too, Scott. This was super fun. Loved it.
Take care. Special thanks again to my guest, Bill Benjamin, for joining us and sharing his perspectives on emotional intelligence, courageous communication, and leading through the last 8% of hard conversations. As we wrap up, remember this: great communication isn't just about what you say, it's also about when and how you say it. Being able to pause, regulate your emotions, and speak your truth, especially when it's uncomfortable, is what sets the best communicators apart. Subscribe to Communicast so you can continue learning from thoughtful leaders like Bill. And if today's episode challenged you to rethink how you show up in tough conversations, consider leaving a rating or review. It helps us grow and reach more listeners like you. Thanks, and have a great day.